We're picking up where we left off. The interesting question is whether we are seeing a lone bad apple now and then, which might be excusable, or whether pretty much the whole basket is rotten. In other words, most companies routinely break the law. To find out, I did 10 Google searches in 2012, combining the names of the 10 largest companies with fraud. There were between 0.5 and 27 million hits for each company. I selected the most prominent case described in the 10 hits on the first Google page and supplied the information with additional sources. The 10 cases were all recent 2012 through 2007 through 2012 and were all related to the United States. The most common criminal offenses were illegal marketing recommending drugs for off-label uses, misrepresentation of research results, hiding data on harms, and Medicaid and Medicare fraud. I described the cases in descending order according to the size of the company. Number 1. Pfizer agreed to pay $2.3 billion in 2009. This was the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the history of the United States Department of Justice at the time. A subsidiary of the firm pleaded guilty to misbranding drugs with the intent to defraud or mislead, and the firm was found to have illegally promoted 4 drugs, Bextra, and an anti-arthritis drug withdrawn from the market in 2005, Geodon, an antipsychotic drug, and Zyvox, an antibiotic, and Lyrica, pregabalin and epilepsy drug. An amount of $1 billion was levied to resolve the allegations that Pfizer paid bribes and offered lavish hospitality to healthcare providers to encourage them to prescribe the 4 drugs, and 6 whistleblowers would receive $102 million. Pfizer entered a corporate integrity agreement with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which means that good behavior is required for the next 5 years. Pfizer had previously entered into 3 such agreements, and when Pfizer promised the federal prosecutors not to market drugs illegally again in 2004, Pfizer was busily doing exactly this while they signed the agreement. Pfizer's antibiotic Zyvox cost 8 times as much as vancomycin, which even Pfizer admitted in its own fact book is a better drug. But Pfizer lied to the doctors, telling them Zyvox was best, even after the FDA had told Pfizer to stop its unsubstantiated claims because they posed serious safety concerns, as vancomycin is used for life-threatening conditions. Pfizer continued to tell hospitals and doctors that Zyvox would save more lives than vancomycin. 2. Novartis agreed to pay $423 million in 2010. The payment concerned criminal and civil liability arising from the illegal marketing and trileptal oxycarbazepine, an epilepsy drug approved for the treatment of partial seizures, but not for any psychiatric pain or other uses. The company lawfully marketed trileptal and 5 other drugs, causing false claims to be submitted to government healthcare programs. The agreement resolved allegations that the company paid kickbacks to healthcare professionals to induce them to prescribe trileptal and 5 other drugs, Diovan for hypertension, Zelnorm, a drug for irritable bowel syndrome and constipation, which was removed from the market by the FDA in 2007 because of cardiovascular toxicity, Sandostatin, a drug that mimics a natural hormone, Exforge, for hypertension, and Tecturna for hypertension. The whistleblowers, all former employees of Novartis, would receive payments of more than $25 million, and Novartis signed a corporate integrity agreement. 3. Sanofi Adventis to pay more than $95 million to settle fraud charge in 2009. According to settlement, Adventis had overcharged U.S. and local health agencies for medication designed for indigent patients. The Justice Department said they would ensure that programs for the most vulnerable parts of the population did not pay any more for drugs than they should under the law. Adventis acknowledged that it misreported drug prices for patients in the Medicaid drug rebate program for poor patients. The firm deliberately misquoted the prices, underpaying rebates to Medicaid and overcharging some public health agencies for medications. The fraud occurred between 1995 and 2000 and concerned steroid-based nasal sprays containing triamcinolone. That's all I'm going. GlaxoSmithKline to pay $3 billion in 2011. This is the largest healthcare fraud settlement in U.S. history. GlaxoSmithKline pleaded guilty to having marketed a number of drugs illegally for off-label use, including Wellbutrin, an antidepressant, Paxil, an antidepressant, Advair, an asthma drug, Avandia, a diabetes drug, Lamicetal, an epilepsy drug. The Justice Department charged a former vice president and top lawyer for Glaxo a year earlier with marketing false statements and obstructing a federal investigation into illegal marketing of Wellbutrin for weight loss. The indictment accused the vice president of lying to the FDA, denying that doctors speaking at company events had promoted Wellbutrin for uses not approved by the agency, and of withholding incriminating documents. The company paid kickbacks to doctors, failed to include certain safety data about rosiglitazone in reports to the FDA, and its sponsored programs suggesting cardiovascular benefits from Adventia, despite warnings on the FDA-approved label regarding cardiovascular risks. Advandia was withdrawn in Europe in 2010 because it increases cardiovascular deaths. Allegations of medical fraud by misreported prices were also covered by the agreement. The whistleblowers were former employees of GlaxoSmithKline, including a former senior marketing development manager and a regional vice president. The company entered into a corporate integrity agreement, number 5, AstraZeneca, to pay $520 million in 2010 to settle fraud case. The charges were that AstraZeneca illegally marketed one of its best-selling drugs, the antipsychotic drug Seroquel, to children, the elderly, veterans, and inmates for uses not approved by the FDA, including aggression, Alzheimer's, anger management, anxiety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dementia, depression, mood disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and sleeplessness. Furthermore, the company targeted its legal marketing towards doctors who do not typically treat psychotic patients and paid kickbacks to some of them. Some doctors were sent to lavish resorts to encourage them to market and prescribe the drug for unapproved uses. The whistleblower would get more than $45 million. The fine was small, as the drug sold for $4.9 billion in 2009. AstraZeneca denied wrongdoing, although its misdeeds were obvious. The U.S. Attorney General said about them, these were not victimless crimes. Illegal acts by pharmaceutical companies and false claims against Medicare and Medicaid can put the public health at risk, corrupt medical decisions by healthcare providers, and take billions of dollars directly out of taxpayers' pockets. Number 6. Roche convinces governments to stockpile Tamiflu. Roche has committed what to me looks like the biggest theft in history, but no one has yet dragged the company to court. In preparation for the mild 2009 influenza epidemic, the European and US governments spent billions of euros and dollars on the purchase of Tamiflu. Roche has admitted publishing most of their clinical trial data and has refused to share them with independent Cochrane researchers. Based on unpublished trials, Roche has claimed that Tamiflu reduces hospital admissions by 61%, secondary complications by 67%, and lower respiratory tract infections requiring antibiotics by 55%. Curiously, the company convinced the European Medicines Agency, EMA, to approve the drug for prevention of influenza complications, and the agency's summary of product characteristics stated that lower respiratory tract complications were reduced from 12.7 to 8.6. In contrast, the FDA sent Roche a warning letter that the company should stop claiming that Tamiflu reduces the severity and incidence of secondary infections, and it required Roche to print a disclaimer on the labels. Tamiflu has not been proven to have positive impact on the potential consequences, such as hospitalizations, mortality, or economic impact of seasonal avian or pandemic influenza. When the FDA first reviewed a similar drug, Zanamivir, Relenza from GlaxoSmithKline, the advisory committee recommended by a vote of 13 to 4 that the drug should not be approved. In analysis after analysis, Zanamivir was no better than placebo when the patients were taking other drugs such as paracetamol. Within days after this decision, Glaxo sent a fiery letter to the FDA stating that the decision was completely at odds with the will of Congress, that drug development and approval proceed swiftly and surely. This threat made the FDA's leadership overrule the committee, and critics This threat made the FDA's leadership overrule the committee and criticize its reviewer, biostatistician Michael Elasoff, for giving negative testimony. Elasoff was originally assigned also the Alstamivir application, but this was taken far away from him, and he left the agency after its demonstration of how an ineffective drug gets approved. When Zanamivir was approved, the FDA also had to approve Ostamivir later the same year. There is no convincing evidence that Tamiflu prevents influenza complications or reduces the spread of influenza to other people. However, Roche used ghostwriters, and one of the ghosts said, the Tamiflu accounts had a list of key messages that you had to get in. It was run by the marketing department, and you were answerable to them. At best, Tamiflu reduces the duration of influenza by 21 hours, which can likely be obtained with far cheaper drugs like aspirin and paracetamol. Furthermore, Tamiflu has important harms, but they were concealed to such an extent that the Cochrane researchers could not report on them in their Cochrane review. Even so, Cochrane researchers found that cases of hallucination and weird incidences have been fairly commonly reported in Roche's post-marketing surveillance of Tamiflu, in accordance with cases serious from Japan and experiments in rats that exhibited mainly of the same symptoms. A journal article signed by a group of Roche authors claimed that rats and mice given a very high dose of Tamiflu showed no ill effects. But according to documents submitted to the Japanese Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, Chongai, the Japanese Roche subsidiary, the exact same dose of Tamiflu killed more than half of the animals. If Roche's unpublished data had really shown what the company purports they have, Roche would have hardly have hesitated to share with them the Cochrane researchers or to publish them. Stunningly, however, Roche had stated that researchers I'm getting tired. Starting this part over. If Roche's unpublished data had really shown what the company purports they have, Roche would hardly have hesitated to share with them the Cochrane researchers or to publish them. Stunningly, however, Roche has stated that the additional studies provided little new information and would therefore be unlikely to accept for publication and most reputable journals. These claims are ridiculous, and I cannot abstain at this point from quoting Drummond Rennie, editor of JAMA, who, in his announcement for this first peer review, Congress stated, after much media attention promised in 2009 to make the full study reports of the unpublished trials available on its website, but this wasn't happening. But this hasn't happened. Another curiosity is that Roche sent one of the Cochrane researchers a draft agreement which stipulated that if signed, he could not even mention that such an agreement existed. Apparently, Roche intended not only to keep its data concealed, but also the fact that it silenced people who asked for the data. The Cochrane researcher asked for the clarification the next day, but never received a reply. The Council of Europe has criticized the national government, the World Health Organization, WHO, and the EU agencies for being guilty of action that led to a waste of large sums of money. Many people have wondered why the WHO selected people to write guidance about influenza drugs who were paid by the companies marketing the drugs and who didn't. Lost my place. Starting over somewhere. Many people have wondered why the WHO selected people to write guidance about influenza drugs who were paid by the companies marketing the drugs and who didn't disclose this in their guidance reports, and why there were so many secrets around it, and that it wasn't even possible for outsiders to get information on who were and who are commitments. Man, I'm tired. Where's the beginning of the sentence? Fuck. And who didn't disclose this in their guidance reports? And why were there so much secrecy around it? And it wasn't even possible for outsiders to get information on who were on the WHO committee. WHO has been an ideal partner for Roche's extensions, and Roche has boasted that it works. WHO has been an ideal partner for Roche's excess, and Roche has been boasting that it works as a responsible partner with governments to assist in their pandemic planning. Roche's actions believe the statement, and in 2011, I suggest that the European government should sue Roche and to get billions of Europeans back that they had spent on needlessly stockpiling Tamiflu, which might also have the effect that the hidden trial results came out in the open. Furthermore, I suggest we should boycott Roche's producers until they publish the misusing total Tamiflu. Number 7. Johnson & Johnson fined more than $1.1 billion in 2012. A jury found that the company and its subsidiary, Janssen, had downplayed and hidden risks associated with its antipsychotic drug, risperidone. The judge found nearly 240,000 violations under Alaskan Medicaid fraud law. Jurors returned a quick verdict in favor of the state, which had argued that Janssen lied about the potentially life-threatening side effects of risperidone, which, like other antipsychotic drugs, included death, strokes, seizures, weight gain, and diabetes. The FDA had ordered Janssen to issue a letter to doctors correcting an earlier letter saying that the drugs didn't increase the FDA. Lost my spot again. I'm tired. The FDA has ordered Janssen to issue a letter to doctors correcting the earlier saying, and the drug didn't increase the risk of developing diabetes. Janssen continued to maintain after the verdict that I didn't break the law. Previous verdicts against the company, a few verdicts that it didn't break the law. Previous verdicts against the company a few months earlier included $327 million civil penalty in South Carolina and $158 million settlement in Texas. The worst of all is that the worst of all this was that the crimes hit hard and also on children. More than a quarter of risperidone's use was in children and adolescents, including non-approved indications, and a panel of federal drug experts concluding that the drug wasn't too far too much. A word received a world-renowned child psychiatrist, Joseph Bitterman, from Harvard, pushed the drug heavily to children and also extorted the company. Internal emails released for use in court cases revealed that Biederman was furious after Johnson & Johnson rejected a request he had made to receive a $280,000 research grant. The company's spokesperson wrote, "I have never seen someone so angry. Since that time, our business became non-existent within his area of control." The fraud could become even bigger. In April 2002, the U.S. government stated in a motion of political multi-billion-dollar healthcare fraud case against Johnson & Johnson that Alex Gorsky, vice president of marketing, who was set to become Johnson & Johnson's next chief executive officer, was highly involved in his and had first-hand knowledge of the allegation fraud. The allegations were that Johnson & Johnson paid kickbacks to induce Omnicare, the nation's largest nursing home pharmacy, to purchase and recommend Risperidol and other of the fuck man, I really keep losing my place. The company didn't quite inform Omnicare members of Janssen's sales staff that the FDA had warned the company that marketing Risperidol as safe and effective in the elderly would be false and misleading because the drug had not been adequately studied in the population, or that the FDA had rejected the company's attempt to get approval to market Risperidol for treatment of psychotic and behavior disturbances in dementia, by far the most prevalent use of Risperidol in Omnicare-served nursing facilities because of inadequate safety data, despite the weight of federal and state investigations of Risperidol allegations. Johnson & Johnson Board of Directors rewarded Gorsky by selecting him to be the next CEO. It is like in the mob: the greater the crime, the greater the advancement. I'm obviously tired. Picking it up.